One self exists. If we are bodies, then there is you, I, he, she, etc. But are we a body? Are you a body? If you are a body, you are here in this place. If you are not the body, but are of an existence innately transcendent of the body, then where are you? Who are you? If the self is defined as body, as a body, then there appears to be multiplicity, multiple selves, apparently one for each body. If you cease to misidentify your existence with the body, what then happens to multiplicity? How then do you distinguish you, I, and the rest? One self exists. Being bodiless, it is unborn and indestructible. Not defined in terms of things objective like the body, it is infinite and eternal, of the nature of being, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda. Bodiless, it is changeless, without condition, phase, or state. This is your very existence. Cease to misidentify with the body, and the direct experience of this, the knowledge of this, is self-evident. If you are not the body, then all of the qualities, attributes, and activities that pertain to the body do not pertain to you. You cannot be described in terms of active or inactive, here and there, now and then, and so forth and so on. All of that pertains to the body. But are you a body? You who know of the body, can this you be a body? One self exists, the infinite, the eternal, of the nature of Brahman, the vast absolute. This is yourself, and there are not two selves. One's existence is invariably singular. Self-knowledge is that in which the undivided existence knows itself as it is. reposing in its own blissful being. Because of this, Sri Bhagavan taught that one should inquire profoundly, in a non-objective manner, who am I? That is, cease to regard the known as the knower, what is objective as yourself, and actually come to know firsthand what the real significance of I means. Who am I? Hearing this instruction, some have wondered, did the Maharshi mean that we should inquire into the true self? Who am I? Or should the inquiry be into the ego, the apparently individualized being? Who am I? If the inquiry is into the self needs no inquiry. It is innately self-luminous, that perfection of being consciousness bliss. How could it inquire, and into what? So the inquiry cannot be for the absolute self, according to that point of view. So then the inquiry must be for the ego, the individualized being. However, the individualized being is entirely illusory, entirely unreal. How could that which is unreal inquire? How could that which is unreal know? The inquiry is into yourself, regardless of whether it is conceived of as absolute or as individualized, for there is only one self. And by an inquiry to know yourself, the false assumption of being a limited individual, because it is unreal, vanishes. And what remains is your quintessential being, self-revealed. To assume you are an individual and then seek the demise of the ego is, the Maharshi says, like a thief being dressed up as a policeman and then being sent out to catch the thief, which is himself. Will he ever be apprehended in such a manner? Therefore, for self-realization, for self-knowledge, inquire. Inquire into the very nature of the inquirer. Casting aside the tendency to misidentify with what is objective, that is, the body, the senses, the mind, inclusive of all the permutations of thought, question the very supposition of existing as an individual entity. If you inquire in such a manner, the real existence shines forth for itself, limitless, self-luminous, the only real self that there is. That is the self of all, and that doesn't even have a notion of all. That is yourself, and in truth there is no other yourself. If you thus inquire and conclusively realize what your true nature is, the perfection of bliss of being, which is unending, is unveiled. There are not two selves, a higher self and a lower self, a true self and yourself. There is only one self. There are not two selves, that one could know or be ignorant of the other. There is only one self. Realize within yourself what is being hinted at. And if in the course of inquiring you have a question, please feel free to ask. Or if you wish to relate your own experience, please feel free to speak.
How do you become self? What is the path?
The path consists of knowledge of oneself. The end itself serves as the means. It takes the form of inquiring. You exist. This is obvious. And you know that you exist. This is also obvious. That knowledge, that deep knowledge that you exist, should know itself as it is, and make no mistake about it. The path is entirely within you. What is within? What is the withinness? Question like this.
One thing that I thought about relating is that the other day you had said, I was talking about desire and craving, and you had asked me if I really would want to give that up. And I kind of, as you were sitting there, it occurred to me kind of that kind of fit into the teaching as far as desire isn't given up, but it's turned within. So that was kind of like, I felt like I kind of got the joke or something to that question where it didn't make sense earlier.
In all your desires, you desire actually one thing. It's not a thing, it's actually the happiness that you wish. The desires can take ever so many forms, but the feeling at which you are aiming is one, the same in all of them. If you find that having that one motivation split up among so many desires for things and circumstances is a cause of suffering, then you will find it intolerable. And then you most certainly will not want to remain with desire and craving. What else is desire but confusion regarding the real source of happiness?
That makes sense, definitely. Because right now I have a much more solid experience of that. The reason I brought that up partly was because it was that realization that kind of caused, I was having trouble being at peace here, and then suddenly it kind of all broke open and I was feeling really at peace. And it was kind of when I realize what you're saying right now, kind of to some, not conclusively, but
Can the temporary fulfillment of any desire give you the same peace?
Obviously, on a logical level, I can say no, but on an experiential level, I obviously retain some idea that it does.
How did your reason and your experience become split?
How did my...
You said on a logical level and an experiential level. How did reasoning and experience become split?
I don't know. I don't think. Obviously they have.
What is your actual experience?
Right now, very at peace. A very deep sense of peace. And somewhat a like dissolution or suspension of egoity. And taking up, being more expansive than just... But I still retain some of that feeling of individuality also, so...
To that degree, the peace can be disturbed. To the degree the ego dissolves, to that degree the innate peace shines. What is the nature of peace is simultaneously happiness. What is the source?
Of happiness? I don't know. You know, like I'm experiencing maybe the source, but it's not localized. So it's not like within physically or something. It's
That's right. Within doesn't mean within the body.
right. Within really kind of includes everything. Like I kind of feel sometimes, to some degree, like I'm in the whole room at the same time. There is an expansiveness.
Why stop at the room?
Because it's, the reason I say the room is because I can't see beyond the room, so...
Why stop with the senses? The senses are so small.
But the senses are also my connection to hearing you talk or seeing you physically that creates that connection. I'm not saying it is the senses, but it seems...
Are we physical?
Are we physical?
Are we bodies?
Well, experientially, the body is something that appears to me.
At some times.
At some times. If I close my eyes, it doesn't appear any.
Right, or if you switch states of mind from waking to dream to deep dreamless sleep, the body is not present in your experience.
Definitely.
But you do not cease to exist.
That's true.
The existence is always, and always the same. The body is not always. The existence is unchanging. The immutable, the changeless, is of the nature of peace. For permanent peace, you must abide as that, the unchanging existence.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think I, as you're talking, do have some experience of that.
Everyone does. Everyone is that.
Especially once you kind of clued in that I exist, because I was dreaming last night. I remember the dreams. And so I recall that I existed during dream.
And was your existence in your dream located actually in the dream body? Or was it beyond that?
I think it was, obviously I imagined the dream that I was walking around and there were events happening. But I guess there was some sense that all that was appearing to me, as opposed to being...
From the vantage point of now being awake, were you in the dream or was the dream in you?
The dream was in me, I guess.
And that me was more than the dream character's body.
Yeah, definitely.
From the point of view of the dream character's body, the dream world seemed external.
Yeah.
When you wake up, you see the dream body, the dream character, the dream world was all that was within you.
Yeah, definitely.
And you were not bound up within it.
Definitely.
Did you extend only as far as the dream room or the dream senses?
Thanks.
Or was
It was within me, so I obviously extended further.
The present waking state is very similar.
It seems a little more difficult to experience that same kind of waking up in the waking state.
What makes the difficulty?
The sense of reality attributed to the waking state. So obviously it's like not being woken up and really taking the dream seriously.
So if we attribute reality to the unreal seems like an obstacle, difficult to get over. If we cease to misidentify, if we cease to attribute the reality to the unreal, what then? Is it difficult?
It's very peaceful and considerably easier.
Is it difficult to be detached from the things of last night's dream now?
No.
Is it difficult to be beyond the desire for dream stuff?
No. Well, except for that there's a lot of times a similarity between the stuff that's desired in dream and waking.
That just shows ignorance is repetitive.
Makes sense.
It is the characteristic of ignorance to take the real to be unreal and the unreal to be real. To regard the self, when one comes to know about it, as something objective, a goal removed from oneself, and to regard that which is not the self as oneself. Such ignorance alone is the cause of feeling bound, limited in any manner, and such bondage alone constitutes suffering. To do away with suffering, put an end to the imagined bondage. To put an end to the bondage, to find out how it is only imaginary, relinquish misidentification. That is, destroy the ignorance.
And this seems like a good place to do that because I have much more of an experience of that. And so I can kind of like eliminate it right now from that standpoint.
Thanks for the instruction on not being the body. This past week or so I've been sick, and not so sick that I had to stop working, but and stay in bed. The main symptom that I have to deal with as far as meditation goes is I don't sleep very well, so my mind is really pretty dull. And what I use as aids for meditation often or scriptures that require that your mind be pretty sharp. And when I try to use those aids now, it doesn't have the same benefit that it normally would. So I kind of started to try to take a different approach, and that was just to just try to set aside those symptoms and just inquire. But it doesn't have the normal depth that I would expect. I also took another approach and just said, okay, let's just, for the sake of it, say this is the beginning of a terminal illness, and the mind's only going to get worse. What am I going to do now? I can't use that as a hindrance or a block. That added a little more fire to it, a little more a little more urgency. But still, it's not easy to meditate when my mind is just real groggy.
Are you not keenly aware of how groggy it is?
I'm so keenly aware of it that I wish I'd be aware of something else. It's almost like, instead of, like, if you say you're depressed, usually you have the same thought over and over. I just keep having the same thought over and over, that I'm kind of half asleep, half awake, not.
But are you half asleep, half awake?
That's a good question.
That which is so keenly aware of the grogginess is not groggy. That which knows the states of waking, dreaming, and halfway in between is not in those states. Certainly you can see the importance on not relying upon that which is transitory. The body with its senses that seem stable one moment, the next moment, figuratively speaking, could be the next day, the next week, the next year, fades from view. There is something that never undergoes modification. It's the very nature of the meditator. The states change, consciousness does not. The essence of the meditator is pure consciousness. You have been struck with a terminal illness. It's called the body. Yet the consciousness, which is your existence, is not in time and is not impermanent. There never was a time when you were not. There never comes a time when you cease to be. But you can't say that of the mind, can you?
No, not even I wouldn't bet on it for any length of time, really. To be steady or...
That which can discern this, even now, is not groggy.
Well, the apparent grogginess I've got to be attributing to my own self, but as you speak, the existence hasn't changed at all, but it does seem to be veiled by the grogginess and the...
Are there then two of you, so that you can be on the other side of the veil from the self?
An existing one and a groggy one? That's what it feels like.
With a veil of grogginess in between?
Well, I don't know if there's even one on the other side. It's more like the one on the other side and the grogginess are one and the same thing. There doesn't seem to be...
So grogginess becomes groggy?
That doesn't make a lot of sense. No, somebody needs to be groggy too.
Who is it that undergoes the states?
Well, I can see that there's states, but I'm not sure that there's somebody who actually goes through them.
Then for whom are they? They're not self-existent. You have to feel they are occurring, they are existing. What is the nature of that one?
I'm trying to discriminate between my existence and anything else. And I can see where I've been used to having a mind that's pretty sharp most of the time. And it's a help and not a hindrance. Now that it's a hindrance, I seem to misidentify with it. I don't know, maybe I misidentified with the mind when I was sharp. Although it didn't seem to be, because just...
How does your existence or consciousness become helped or hindered?
That's a great...
Did any arrangement of thoughts make the consciousness shine brighter? Did your existence ever depend upon even the clearest of thoughts?
No. No, my existence never has anything to do with thoughts or the body.
And do you know this with certainty?
Well, no, otherwise I wouldn't be having the conversation.
You might.
I doubt it. Maybe, but probably not. When I said that I know that my existence doesn't depend on the body, or I know that, I was going to say I know that from past experience. When I'm not groggy, it's funny how I have this whole thing about...
Is your existence reduced to the past?
No, that's why it was kind of a goofy reference to...
You exist always. The mind, not so. Can you see this?
I can see it to some degree. I don't see it with absolute certainty, because there is some concern, there is some...
What is the concern?
I guess the concern is if my mind stayed this groggy forever, then I wouldn't be very happy, because I don't feel very happy, or I feel less happy when the body feels pretty crummy.
Why do you make your happiness dependent on the state of the body?
I don't know, it's not a very good approach. It's a bad connection. It's not a very... well, it's a connection sure to cause unhappiness. I can see that.
How do you suppose you'll be free of it?
That I think I do know. I just need to practice it. I need to really inquire and see if the condition of the body or the mind is who I am.
That from which this knowledge pours forth is already beyond the body and mind.
That I can see.
That which so sees, that so discerns, is not groggy, is it?
No, it doesn't have any connection with grogginess.
Because it has no connection with the body and no connection with that collection or movement of thought that is styled as the mind.
As I look further into my existence, I can see that it hasn't changed with the change that I'm calling the body being sick.
So existence does not depend on the body. Knowledge of existence does not depend on a state of the body. The existence itself is pure happiness, to which nothing can compare. Every joyful mental mode is but a faint reflection or expression of that innate happiness. To abide as existence, which means to know your existence as it is to be the happiness itself. And happiness will not lose itself, just as you will not cease to exist. Existence does not become non-existence at any time, nor can it change its nature. The inquiry to know oneself consists of non-objective self-knowledge. Therefore, it is available in any state or condition of body and mind, living or dead. Is it clear for you now? Well, then I hope you feel better. But Sri Bhagavan has provided the sovereign remedy for the illness of samsara.
So this conversation's pretty interesting because, I was meditating on this because we just had a retreat recently. And it was, I don't know, it just was an amazing retreat for me. And the third day though, I guess all this lack of sleep had caught up with me, so I was like totally exhausted. And I guess it comes down to any identification when, the prana or whatever has been modified. Because if it's clear, like what Jim was talking about, you think, oh, great, right? You don't even think that. You think this is normal. But when it's been modified, when there's any identification with it, it seems like, whoa, this is kind of harder to, meditate or concentrate. So I just noticed that for me, it would be, it's... in a certain sense, I can say, well, that depth of understanding from the previous day was sort of, I knew it was there, but I couldn't touch it to that same depth. Or what I perceived as the same depth, but I'm thinking, whoa, maybe it was still misidentified.
What marks off the eye from the depth? I can't reach the depth. What is the depth and what is the eye?
Well, definitely. In this case, the depth seems like it lacks less definition of I. In the other case, there's more definition of what I call I. In this case, it was a groggy mind.
Is the definition true? If you are one with a groggy mind, you should always be one with a groggy mind. Whatever is your nature is always your nature. If you have a groggy mind at some times, and other times do not, either because you have no mind at all, or because the mind's in a different state, then you cannot be one with a groggy mind. If it's really your attribute, it should be with you always.
Definitely it's not with me always. But you know, it just seems very important to know this to the depth, because some people are blessed with clear minds, and some people, for whatever reason, ailments come, like you were just discussing.
Ailments come eventually to everybody.
Yeah.
For some it may be groggy mind or tiredness. For others it might be tremors and other associated symptoms. Every body is destructible. There is always something that is never destroyed, though, but it's not the body. Minds are changeable. Changes in the very character of the mind. There is something that does not change. You should know yourself as that. If you know yourself as that, abiding as that, as just unborn, imperishable being, then you are not dismayed when the body becomes ill, grows old, or dies.
Yeah. I think when you said that about the change, and I think that's why it's much easier to meditate, and I guess it should make a difference if there's no identification. But that, because the clarity of, having a clear mind, or a sattvic mind, it's like less of something, whether it's imagined. So it's like the senses thing you were talking about earlier. It's just another sort of sense, even though it's a mental sense, but one is kind of a groggy sense, in a mental sort of sense, right? That something's been modified. And that's perceived to be something.
The consciousness...
In this case, it could be like the example of this room. Right?
The consciousness, which is the silent witness of the mind, is not modified. If you know yourself as that consciousness, you find it to be boundaryless. And thereupon is the realization that there is no such existent thing as a mind.
Thank you, Master. In this wonderful instruction about transcending senses and mind, I felt in your discourse there was one very beautiful expression that takes care of that for me, which is conclusively realized. Even as you said it, but it came back to me more and more listening to your instruction, that conclusively realized has in it complete independence of sense and mental experience. It not only doesn't rely on them, it almost laughs off any attempt to connect the two. I even remember long before coming to the teaching, although coming to the teaching, there have been numerous, at least at the level that I can retrieve in memory of, this feeling of conclusively realized, but even before that, it might have been love, it might have been optimism, but there was some occurrence that allowed me to not have any concern for sense or mental experience, sometimes even for months at a time. And that was before encountering the teaching, and the teaching just delivers so much of that. But it seems that the conclusively realized part has that transcendence right in it.
When knowledge is identical with being, it is conclusive. When it is known as the reality without an alternative, that is non-duality, it is conclusive. The quality of being conclusive rests in the self's absolute nature. How real is the real? How unreal is the unreal? Like this is the finality realized.
Ashtavakra Uvacha Avinashinamaatmanam ekam vijñāya tattvataha tavatmajñasya dhīrasya kathamartharjane ratihi.
Ashtavakra said, having known yourself as really indestructible and one, how is it that you, knower of the self and serene, feel attached to the acquisition of wealth?
Atmajnānādaho prītihi vishaya brahmagochare shukte rajñānato lobho yadhā rajata vibhrame.
Alas, as greed arises from the illusion of silver caused by ignorance of the mother of pearl, even so arises attachment to the objects of illusory perception from ignorance of the self.
Vishvam spurati yatredam taranga iva sagare sohamasmiti vijñāya kim dina iva dhavasi.
Having known yourself to be that in which the universe appears like waves on the sea, why do you run about like a miserable being?
Shrutva bhishuddha chaitanyam atmanam ati sundaram upasthethyanta samsakto malinyam adhigacchati.
After hearing oneself to be pure consciousness and surpassingly beautiful, how can one yet be deeply attached to sensual objects and thus become impure?
Sarva bhuteshu chatmanam sarva bhutani chatmani muner janata ascharyam mamattvamanu vartate.
It is strange that the sense of ownership should still continue in the wise one who has realized the self in all and all in the self.
Asthita paramadvaitam moksharthe vyavasthitaha ascharyam kamavashago vikalakkelirikshayam.
It is strange that one abiding in the supreme non-duality and intent on liberation should yet be subject to lust and weakened by the practice of amorous pastimes.
Udbhudam jnana durmitram avadharyati durbalaha ascharyam kamamakangshet कालमन्तं मनुश्रुतः.
It is strange that knowing lust to be an enemy of knowledge, a man who has grown extremely weak and reached his last days should yet be eager for sensual enjoyment.
Iha mutra viraktasya nitya nitya vivekinaha ashcharyam mokshakamasya mokshadeva vibhishika.
It is strange that one who is unattached to the objects of this world and the next, who discriminates the eternal from the transient, and who longs for emancipation, should yet fear dissolution of the body.
Dhirastu bhojyamanopi pīdyamanopi sarvada atmanam kevalam pashyan na tushyati na kupyati.
Fetid and feasted or tormented, the serene person ever sees the absolute self and is thus never gratified nor angry.
Cheshtamanam shariram swam pasyatyanya sharirabate samstave chapi nindayam kadham kshubhet mahashayaha.
The high-souled person witnesses his own body acting as if it were another's. As such, how can he be disturbed by praise or blame?
Maya matramidam vishwam pashyan vigata kautukaha api sannihite mrityau kadam trayasi dhiradhihi.
Realizing this universe as mere illusion and losing all curiosity, how can one of steady mind yet fear the approach of death?
Nispraham manasam yasya nairashyepi mahatmanaha tasyatmajnana triptasya tulana kena jayate.
With whom can we compare that great-souled one who is content with self-knowledge and does not hanker even after liberation?
Swabhavadeva janano drishyame tanna kinchana idam grahyam idam tyajyam sakyam pashyati dhiradhihi.
Why should that steady-minded one who knows the object of perception to be in its very nature nothing consider one thing acceptable and another unacceptable?
Antastyakta kashayasya nirdvandvasya nirashishaha yadrichaya gado bhogo na dukkhaya na tushtaye.
He who has given up worldly attachment from his mind, who is beyond the pairs of opposites, and who is free from desire, to him no experience coming as a matter of course causes either pleasure or pain.
Shanti.